During my last year at college, I bumped into Lisa at a local Nashville club while hanging out with some friends. She was celebrating her 21st birthday, and I literally crashed into her table, accidentally dumping her drink right into her lap. It was pretty awkward, but I apologized, and as we chatted while cleaning up the mess, I couldn't shake the feeling that love at first sight might actually be real. Something special, almost magnetic, drew us together that night. From that moment on, we started dating, and didn't spend a day apart. A year later, we tied the knot, marking the beginning of our life together. I am Michael, but my friends usually call me Mike. With my degree in accounting, I became a certified public accountant at a big firm in Atlanta, where Lisa and I eventually settled close to our families. After gaining some experience in the corporate world, I took the plunge and started my own firm. Lisa, who had a degree in business administration, stood by me through those tough first 2 years until we got the wonderful news that our daughter Emily was on the way. Our relationship felt like a fairy tale, with a love that seemed unbreakable as we welcomed Emily into our world. Over the next 10 years, we fell into the rhythm of a typical family life. I was focused on growing my business, while Lisa took care of our home and raised our daughter. Our sex life was satisfying, averaging at least 3 times a week, and it was grounded in genuine affection. We didn't feel the need to experiment wildly. We found joy in the simple shared moments of intimacy. Lisa enjoyed oral stimulation, and I was more than happy to oblige, but she reserved giving oral pleasure for special occasions, which happened less than 10 times in all the years we were together. I never pressured her because I valued the harmony we had. From the day we got married, Lisa showered me with attention, kisses, hugs, and shared moments whenever we were together. Our marriage was filled with an incredible closeness, and every second was brimming with love. Friends who were initially skeptical about how long our affection would last eventually admitted they were wrong when they saw how strong we were after a decade. When Emily turned 10, Lisa expressed her desire to return to work. With Emily's routine well established and her coming home from school at 3:30 p.m. each day, Lisa didn't want to stay home all the time and longed to rejoin the workforce. After many discussions, we figured out a plan to make sure Emily got all the attention she needed as a 10-year-old. Lisa landed a job as a personal assistant to David, a lawyer 10 years older than her. The hours were great, allowing her to be home by 4 p.m. each day so she could be there for Emily. As a family, we just kept getting stronger. We lived in a nice apartment within a high-end complex, complete with a country club membership. Our finances were solid, letting us save for Emily's college and our retirement. We really were living a blessed life, free from worries about health, money, or happiness. As you'd expect, our sex life slowed down after a decade of marriage, dropping from 3 to 4 times a week to about twice, usually on Friday and Saturday nights. Even though we became a bit predictable, our love stayed strong, and we continued to cherish our closeness. Lisa's unfaltering attention and affection remained consistent throughout the years, making our emotional connection more rewarding than the physical side of things. Her spontaneous kisses and hugs, along with her constant affirmations of love, were overwhelming in the best way. It was the most important part of our marriage. I returned her affection, but she always made sure I understood how deeply she loved me. Emily joined the math club and started staying after school, getting home around 5 p.m. At the same time, Lisa began working late 2 nights a week, matching Emily's schedule. We were careful not to leave her alone at that age, making sure our schedules aligned. David, Lisa's boss, got promoted to senior partner at his father-in-law's firm. As a result, Lisa had to put in a few extra hours on Tuesday and Thursday nights, coming home by 7 p.m. On those evenings, I made sure to have dinner ready for her after her long day. Apart from those 2 nights, nothing really changed in our marriage. My business was booming, bringing in a great income as we grew to 45 employees. Our firm had become well known and respected, catching the eye of bigger companies interested in merging or acquiring us. When Emily turned 15, she started thinking about college and what she wanted for her future. Lisa was still working for David and looked as stunning as the day we met. Time had been kind to Lisa, maintaining her slim figure, long, attractive legs, and a nicely shaped backside. Despite her good looks, she kept a professional and conservative demeanor. Some might call our lifestyle boring, spending most of our time at home together or attending movies and family events with our daughter. We were always together as a family, never going out separately or without each other as a couple. One day I got a call from David, Lisa's boss. He told me Lisa would be receiving an award at a banquet next month, and both Emily and I were invited. Proudly, I accepted the invitation and later shared with Emily that her mom was getting an award for her outstanding work. It was meant to be a surprise, as these events were usually for employees only, so we had to keep it under wraps until the ceremony. In the 5 years Lisa had been working for David, she'd consistently impressed everyone with her work, which had boosted her happiness and self-esteem at home. I knew she was hard-working and well-liked, but hearing they wanted to honor her made Emily and me feel incredibly proud. Lisa mentioned she had an upcoming business meeting at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, where she'd have to stay late to give a presentation to the entire company. She was really looking forward to it, having put in many hours of preparation leading up to the event. At that time, she didn't know about the award or our invitation, and Emily and I kept it a secret. We were eagerly anticipating the event and Lisa's big moment. I took Emily shopping for a new dress, and I picked up a new suit, wanting Lisa to be proud of her family on her big night. Lisa chose a knee-length dress with a cutout in the back, striking a balance between professionalism and showing off her lovely curves. At 37, she still looked amazing and desirable. Before the limo arrived to take her to the meeting, Emily and I hugged her, wishing her good luck for the presentation. With 2 hours to get ready after she left, we dressed on time and headed to the event. About half an hour before Lisa's presentation, one of the hosts welcomed us and showed us to a table in the center with a great view of the stage. Emily and I were treated warmly, with everyone expressing their admiration for Lisa and joy in meeting us. We felt truly welcomed and delighted to be there for her. As the lights in the audience dimmed, the introductions began. On stage, spotlights danced around as the first speaker introduced the firm's founder, the CEO, and finally David, the senior partner. David gave a brief overview of the company's successful year before inviting Lisa to the stage to share some highlights from the past year. Lisa stepped up, looking as beautiful as ever, and I could see the pride in Emily's eyes as her mom began speaking in a confident, polished voice. Lisa detailed the company's achievements and future plans, speaking for about 10 minutes before handing the stage back to David. Before she left the stage, David hugged her and said a few words to the audience. He talked about his close working relationship with Lisa over the past 5 years and emphasized how essential she'd been to the organization. He made it clear that many of their successes wouldn't have been possible without her contributions. Then, David announced that Lisa was being honored with the Chairman's Club Award, the company's highest recognition for employees who go above and beyond. Along with a sizable plaque, Lisa received an envelope containing a $10,000 award. With tears in her eyes, she accepted the check, hugged David, thanked the audience, and turned to Emily and me. We were both tearing up as we shared the pride in her accomplishments, and the folks at our table offered hugs, making it one of our happiest nights. Brimming with pride and unable to stop smiling, we headed to the bar for a drink as the lights came back on. I took my daughter's glass and promised her I'd be right back. At the bar, amidst the long lines, I noticed an empty one near the stage and decided to grab a double Jack and a soda for Emily. In high spirits, I tossed $5 into the tip jar, collected the drinks, and turned to head back to our table. That's when my world came crashing down. On my way back, I caught sight of something that made my heart sink. Behind the curtains, I saw a couple caught up in an intimate embrace. It seemed wildly out of place for such a formal event, but then I recognized the dress, Lisa's dress. I looked again, frozen, watching the couple share a deep kiss. Their closeness suggested this wasn't a first encounter. It was more than a momentary lapse. I felt like I was outside myself, standing there with 2 drinks in hand, my mouth open in shock. I watched until they parted, confirming it was indeed Lisa, my wife, caught up in a romantic kiss with her boss, David. In that moment, one of the drinks slipped from my hand, and the sound caught their attention. Lisa saw me, her face a mix of shock and panic. As I snapped back to reality, I turned and walked back to the table with the remaining drink. Lisa quickly caught up to me, trying to explain, but I just nodded numbly and sat down with a heavy heart. For the rest of the evening, it was clear I was distressed, unable to share in the joy around us. I'd witnessed more than just a friendly kiss, and in truth, Lisa and I hadn't kissed like that in years, at least 5 to be exact. As I reflected on those years and the changes that had crept in, I knew trouble was on the horizon, though I wasn't sure of its shape just yet. On the drive home, Emily and Lisa chatted about the night. Emily was beaming with pride for her mother, but I was in a daze, struggling to process what I'd witnessed. I stayed silent, lost in my thoughts. Both of them noticed my quietness and tried to get me to talk, but I just couldn't. Lisa, sensing my discomfort, attempted to make amends with extra sweetness and affection, but I was too numb to respond. That night, I tried to hide my feelings from Emily. However, being the intuitive kid she was, she picked up on my distress and wisely gave me space. Before bed, she assured me she was there if I needed to talk, giving me a hug and a kiss before turning in. I retreated to my room, and soon Lisa joined me, asking if I was okay and voicing her concern. She tried to comfort me, but after a long pause, I just turned away. Apologizing for what had happened, she begged me to talk, but I remained silent, the anger welling up inside me. I knew that if I spoke, my words would be sharp and unhelpful. Her attempts to reach out that night went unanswered, and I hardly slept at all. The next morning, a Saturday, I woke to sunlight streaming in, dreading the day ahead. Replaying the painful scene from the night before, I tried to wrap my head around everything. I got out of bed, went to the bathroom, washed up, and brushed my teeth. When I returned to the bedroom, Lisa was sitting up, watching me and trying to act like everything was normal. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" she asked as if nothing had happened. I ignored her question, put on some jeans and a t-shirt, and before leaving the room, I finally spoke to her since the night before. Looking at her with a pained expression, I asked, "How long?" She didn't answer, just stared at her hands. I walked out, needing breakfast and some space to think. I dreaded hearing her confession about the affair, knowing she had to come clean because any lie would be obvious. We had always been close, and she'd never given me a reason to think she wanted another man. Her affection hadn't waned. She still hugged and kissed me like always. How could she act so loving when she was involved with someone else? Was she really having an affair with David? I checked the clock, realizing Emily needed to be at school for math club by 1 p.m. It was time to confront the situation. Driving home, I found Lisa on the patio, sipping coffee and staring at the lake. Without a word, I poured myself a cup, sat down beside her, and asked again, "How long?" After a few minutes of silence, I saw tears streaming down her face. What she said next hit me like a punch to the gut. In a soft, tearful voice, she admitted it had been going on for 3 years. I pressed her for confirmation, and she nodded, mentioning it was during the nights I worked late. "Yes," she whispered. I sat there in silence, absorbing the truth. My mind was racing, trying to comprehend how the 2 nights she worked late each week had turned into moments of intimacy with David. Seeking clarity, I asked if my understanding was correct. She confirmed it, saying they hadn't been intimate anywhere else and asked for a chance to explain further. I stopped her, telling her I didn't want to hear it. She'd just confessed to being with her boss twice a week for 3 years. The math was simple, over 300 times, assuming at least twice each night. I confronted Lisa, laying bare the enormity of her betrayal. Over 500 acts of infidelity right under my nose. How could anyone handle such a blow? Her tears fell onto her lap as I continued, reflecting on the possibility that they might have even laughed at my ignorance. I thanked her bitterly for the humiliation and the deliberate hurt she caused. The woman I thought loved me had shattered our marriage and crushed my heart. It was a shocking and devastating revelation that left me deeply wounded. She insisted it wasn't what it seemed, but I couldn't believe her. Interrupting her attempt to explain, I told her to be quiet. Ignoring her pleas, I stood up and left the porch. As she stayed there, crying and begging me to listen, I kept my composure outwardly, but inside, I was a mess of emotions. Needing to calm the storm within me, I went for a drive. The betrayal was like nothing I'd ever experienced, and I needed time to process her confession and decide my next move. I realized I needed to talk to someone, and the only family I had left was my brother Chris. Though we had taken different paths in life, we had been close growing up. Chris had spent 5 years in federal prison for dealing drugs and ran in dangerous circles. By contrast, I was the straight-laced one, a churchgoer, an accountant who paid too much in taxes and didn't even have a parking ticket. We didn't talk often, but when we were kids, Chris always looked up to me for guidance. I was there for Chris during his trial, and thanks to some political contacts, I managed to get his sentence reduced from the mandatory 20 years to just 5. That morning, I decided to give him a call. After checking in on how he was doing, I opened up about the mess I was in. "Of course, what's going on?" he asked. I told him about Lisa's infidelity, explaining that I had just found out and was feeling lost, driving around aimlessly. I apologized for dumping my problems on him. "Oh man, I love Lisa, and I can't believe she'd do this," he said. "Do you know who it is and what exactly happened?" I admitted that I knew who was involved, but didn't have all the details. It wasn't a one-time slip-up, and I was burning with a need for revenge against the one responsible. The anger was so intense that I even thought about hurting my wife. Chris gave me some advice, drawing from his experiences and those of friends who had been through similar situations. He told me to channel my anger into something physical, like hitting the gym or going for a run. It was crucial to calm down, he said, and he offered to help me navigate through this mess. Chris suggested that I gather all the facts before deciding what to do next. He assured me he was there to support any plans I made. He also advised me to speak as little as possible and try to act normally, acknowledging how tough that would be. Finally, he told me to call him the next day with an update, promising his continued support. I thanked Chris for being there and assured him I'd be in touch the following day before ending the call. As I drove, I passed a mattress store and had my first idea. I parked and went inside, making my first move. I didn't plan on leaving the marriage until Emily was in college, which meant staying married for another 2 years. But there was no way I was going to share a bed with Lisa again. I couldn't sleep with her anymore, and I refused to leave my bedroom. So I formed my first action plan, realizing there was a lot more to do. After speaking with a salesperson, I told them I'd pay full price if they could deliver 2 full-size beds I'd chosen, along with all the necessary furniture, including headboards, hardware, and assembly. I also paid an extra $100 to have our current king-size bed dismantled. We scheduled the delivery for 4 p.m. That afternoon, I texted Emily to let her know I'd pick her up from school. We went out for lunch, and I gently explained that there would be some changes at home soon. During our conversation, Emily brought up the previous night's dinner, noting that something seemed off. She asked not to be kept in the dark, stressing the importance of the honesty we had always shared. Recognizing the fairness of her request, I admitted that I saw her mom and her boss kissing backstage, but I downplayed it as possibly just a congratulatory gesture. I suggested that a kiss like that shouldn't be a reason for intense anger. But then I told her that after confronting her mother, she admitted to having an affair with him for 3 years. This revelation was hard to wrap my head around, and it had permanently altered our relationship. Emily asked if I planned to divorce her mom. I explained that I hadn't decided yet, and was still trying to work through everything. I reassured her that for now, we would remain married, but things would be different. I stressed the importance of her staying strong and not taking sides, reminding her that her mother loved her. I acknowledged the mistakes both her mother and I had made, expressing my hope that Emily's life wouldn't be negatively impacted by them. I asked her not to judge us too harshly and to understand that we loved her more than anything. She was in tears during our conversation, aware that learning the truth had hurt me. Although I didn't want her to feel guilty, she felt it was necessary for her to understand why our lives were changing. When we got home, Lisa looked surprised. From Emily's expression, it was clear that I had told her what was going on. Emily gave her mother a look of disdain and went to her room without a word. I explained to Lisa that Emily had a right to know and needed to understand why things were going to change. I suggested that Lisa talk to Emily once she had processed the initial shock. Worried about what was to come, Lisa asked if I was planning to divorce her. I told her it wasn't something I was immediately considering because I wanted to see how things played out, especially with Emily in mind. However, I made it clear that big changes were on the horizon. From that day on, Lisa kept begging me to let her explain, pleading for my understanding, insisting that she loved me and that we were still husband and wife. But I confronted her, laying it all out, that she'd willingly had an affair with David more than 500 times without me knowing. I couldn't fathom how she thought any self-respecting man would accept such betrayal. I questioned if she thought I was weak and pointed out that she clearly hadn't thought through the consequences of her actions. What truly hurt me was losing the closeness I had cherished and looked forward to. I told her that I couldn't share that closeness with her anymore, and that it would take an emotional toll on me. I made it clear that I wouldn't be going to bed with her or making love anymore, expressing how much I'd missed the little gestures like hugs and kisses. I told her that, given her betrayal, I would no longer be faithful either and planned to seek other relationships. This was a drastic change for me, as I'd never considered doing anything like that before. I concluded by telling her she could continue seeing her lover because she'd get nothing from me anymore. It was like she'd been hit over the head. She stumbled back onto the couch, clearly shocked. She hadn't realized the full consequences of her infidelity. I told Lisa that after what she'd done, I couldn't agree to stay faithful, considering the gravity of her betrayal. I intended to find other relationships because of the pain her cheating, lying, and deceit had caused me. Just as our conversation reached this peak, the doorbell rang, interrupting us. I welcomed the installers who had come to remove our shared bed. I explained to Lisa that because of our strained relationship, I had bought 2 new beds to replace the old one. The installation was already underway. Lisa, surprised and confused, asked why the installers were there and why I was making these changes. I explained that since I had no intention of ever sharing a bed with her again, it wouldn't be fair for either of us to move into the guest room. So, I bought 2 separate beds. The old one was being taken out, and the new ones were being set up. I mentioned she could exchange her mattress within 90 days if it didn't suit her. "Are we really going to sleep in separate beds?" she asked in disbelief. I told Lisa it wasn't fair for either of us to give up our shared bedroom, especially now that our closeness was over. The whole situation felt surreal, and I couldn't believe the changes we were going through. I reminded her of her affair with her boss, pointing out that it happened over 500 times behind my back. Watching the men remove the bed we'd shared for so many years was painful and filled me with regret. Regret that I had been married to someone who could betray me so deeply. The next day, I called my brother Chris and told him the shocking truth about Lisa's affair with her boss. I explained my disbelief that she had been involved with him twice a week for the past 3 years, amounting to over 500 times. I felt blindsided and humiliated, unsure of my next steps. I shared the identity of the man involved, Lisa's boss, David Turner, expressing my deep dissatisfaction with the situation. Chris sympathized, acknowledging how unfortunate it all was. I confided in him my wish for David to suffer for his role in the affair. Chris asked about my plans regarding Lisa, and I told him I intended to divorce her once Emily was in college. I planned to make life difficult for her until then, keeping her isolated and alone. I was determined to expose her actions and ruin her career if she tried to divorce me before Emily went to college. Concerned for my safety, Chris offered to take care of David Turner while I managed things at home. I warned him against doing anything illegal and insisted on handling the situation responsibly. Chris assured me he understood and promised not to do anything that could put him in jeopardy. We wrapped up the conversation, agreeing to talk again soon. The following weeks were stressful. At home, Lisa tried to engage me in conversation, but I only gave her a word or two in response. I could tell she was frustrated and desperate for forgiveness, but I was still too hurt, angry, and unyielding. I buried myself in work, coming home late every night and staying out on the weekends. The tension was palpable. Everyone was on edge, waiting for me to explode. One night, after a long day at work, I came home to find Lisa in her bed, waiting to talk to me. After all these years of sleeping next to the only woman I'd ever loved, I was now in a separate bed just a few feet away from hers. It was a sad reality, and I wasn't sure how I would endure this setup for the next 2 years until Emily left for college. After my shower, I lay down in bed, and Lisa tried to start a conversation by asking how my day had been. I gave her a curt reply, "Good." She then said she wanted to talk about some things, acknowledging that she knew I wanted nothing to do with her. Despite this, she told me she still loved me and wanted to try and make some small improvements in our relationship. She even suggested quitting her job, saying we didn't need the extra money and that she could be around more for me. She asked what I thought about it. I struggled to contain my anger, but hearing her try to use words of closeness set me off. I sat up and spoke harshly, telling her I didn't care what she did with her life and that she should do whatever she wanted. I made it clear I no longer wanted any romantic involvement with her. Tears welled up in my eyes as I let her know just how deeply her actions had hurt me. As I turned over and put my head on the pillow, I could hear Lisa sobbing, and it hit me how much pain I was in. She pleaded with me to talk, admitting how sorry she was for what she'd done. She said she still loved me and that the lack of physical connection between us was killing her. The coldness that had developed between us was breaking her heart. She admitted she didn't know how to fix things, but said she wanted to try to save our relationship. Lisa also mentioned how toxic the tension in the house had become, and she was worried about how it was affecting Emily, who seemed to be suffering because of it. She suggested counseling as a way to figure out how to coexist without all the hatred, and urged me to consider it for Emily's sake, especially since she would be leaving home soon. I sighed, acknowledging that Lisa's concern for Emily was fair. I realized our daughter was going through a rough time. After a pause, which surprised Lisa, I agreed to go to therapy, making it clear that my motivation was purely for Emily, not for her. Lisa, visibly moved, saw this as progress, and her tears turned from sadness to relief. The next evening, Lisa told me she had found a therapist and was planning to meet with her individually. The following day, she said she had scheduled a couples session for Friday at 3 p.m., recognizing the need for us to find a way to live without dragging out a lengthy divorce. I agreed that living in peace was important. Emily was excited when she heard about the counseling sessions, hoping they might help bring our family back together. Her smile, which had been missing for weeks, returned. Lisa told me that Emily was pleased he'd agreed to the counseling. Every night after work, I ate dinner alone, deliberately avoiding Lisa. Yet I felt the absence of my daughter, my Emily, during these times. I longed for her smile, the warmth of her hugs, and the sweet way she called me Daddy. Even though I wanted to keep my distance from Lisa, I craved the connection with my daughter. Lisa went to her solo counseling session and was visibly drained that evening. When I got home, I saw she'd been crying, and I realized how hard it must have been for her to confess to years of betrayal. Somehow, though, I couldn't find any sympathy or compassion for the woman who'd broken my heart. Later that week, Chris called me to let me know what was happening on his end. He explained that he still had some favors owed to him by former associates, not in cash, but in actions for what he'd done for them. He told me not to worry, that everything was under control. After contacting one of his connections, Chris explained the situation. They understood and said they'd handle it and let him know when it was done. Chris told me they planned to make David suffer, leaving O.L. Turner a reminder. He trusted them to take care of it, knowing it wouldn't be pretty. Chris gave them David's name, workplace, and phone number. Apparently that was all they needed. When Lisa told David that I had discovered their affair, he was devastated. He had real feelings for Lisa and cherished the way she made him feel. They saw themselves as a couple during their time together, sharing what they considered love in those brief moments alone. As the affair became routine, neither believed their few hours a week could hurt anyone. They were just two friends enjoying each other's company. Both thought their spouses never really missed anything or felt neglected. It was just a few hours a week, and no one was missing their short time together. It seemed like the perfect arrangement, providing them with excitement and a bit of extra affection missing after many years of marriage. Our first session with Dr. Carter, the counselor, finally began. As expected, she took charge, opening the conversation. She thanked me for coming and acknowledged that Lisa had already shared her side earlier in the week. Dr. Carter emphasized that honesty in my responses was crucial and reassured me that everything discussed would remain confidential. Dr. Carter encouraged openness, reassuring me that nothing I said would shock her. I nodded, curious about how this session would unfold. The counselor then asked Lisa to share her intentions for our counseling sessions. Lisa, my unfaithful wife, turned to me with tears in her eyes and laid bare her desires. She expressed a deep longing to communicate, to rebuild our family, and to restore the physical and emotional connection we once had. Her emotions were raw, and I could sense the sincerity behind her words. Though it was hard to see her in pain over losing my love, I kept my composure, sitting silently as she wiped her tears away with a handkerchief. When Dr. Carter asked about my goals for the sessions, I admitted that I wanted to erase the haunting significance of the number 500 from my mind. I noticed Lisa wince and look away when I mentioned it. Seeing the counselor's confusion, I spoke with sarcasm, hinting that Lisa might have skipped this detail in her previous session. Dr. Carter asked for clarification, and I explained that, as an accountant, numbers had a special importance to me. Over the past 3 years, Lisa had been intimate with David over 500 times without my knowledge. This had seared itself into my mind. So whenever the number 500 came up, it was the first thing I thought of. After each emotional outburst, there was a period of silence as feelings settled. Dr. Carter addressed me as Mr. Evans and expressed understanding of my pain, but cautioned against using hurtful language. I apologized, acknowledging the need to voice my perspective and pain. Lisa, in tears, repeated her apologies, and gradually my anger ebbed, and I began to relax. When asked again about my goals, I said I wanted to find a way to forgive Lisa. My ultimate aim was to create a home free of hate and anger, especially for our daughter's sake. I stressed the importance of living together in peace, knowing the impact it would have on our family. I thanked Dr. Carter for giving me the chance to express my feelings. Over the next few weeks, I managed to speak to Lisa in a civil tone without the anger. Things at home were better. Not great, but better. Emily was around more often. We went out to eat, caught a few movies, spent time with friends, and tried to seem like a normal couple. The only issue was that everyone noticed the lack of closeness between us. We never held hands, kissed, or hugged, and I never let her touch me. Friends started asking Lisa what was wrong, since our relationship looked like the complete opposite of what it had been for the last 15 years. It was obvious we were struggling, but we carried on. 2 weeks after our initial couples session, there was a break-in at David's house. Unidentified men entered, gave him a beating without explaining why, and left quickly. David ended up in the hospital. When Lisa heard about the incident, she was shocked, suspecting my involvement given my desire for revenge. That night, she mentioned how someone had broken into David's home and attacked him, watching for my reaction. A small grin crossed my face as I replied, "Wow, that's something," before going back to my book. Surprised by my indifference, Lisa asked how I felt about what happened to David, striking a nerve. I looked at her sharply and said, "Oh, I am so sorry your lover got hurt. Should I send him flowers? Or should we go see him, darling?" She looked away, ending the conversation. Lisa knew I was behind it and understood that showing any sympathy for David could undo all the progress we had made. Earlier in the week, I got a text from Chris with a thumbs-up emoji, marking our last contact for several months. As things settled down, I wondered if the police would uncover the affair and question me about the attack. But that never happened. The police filed the report as an open case and moved on to other crimes. Months passed, and as promised, I started dating and staying out late. After Lisa asked a few times what I was up to, she realized she should mind her own business and not stir up trouble. I reminded her that we were husband and wife in name only, living together for Emily's sake. Eventually, we found a way to be civil, and family life began to improve. Lisa finally grasped the extent of the damage she had caused and knew it couldn't be undone. To keep our family intact, I warned her that if she pursued a divorce, I'd tell her family and friends about her affair and make her life miserable. Before Emily left for college, Lisa remained legally married but emotionally alone. She no longer had anyone to return the love she used to give through hugs, kisses, and affection. That love, which defined her relationships with 2 men, was gone. Even though she continued counseling alone, seeing me happy with another woman only deepened her sadness. Her vanity, selfishness, and foolishness had destroyed our marriage and the man she loved. Emily, despite loving her mother, always reminded her that she'd brought this upon herself whenever she complained about me. While Emily never forgave Lisa for hurting me, her love for her mom endured. After Emily left for college, I returned home with divorce papers. A year earlier, I'd thought about ruining Lisa financially, but over the past 2 years, I decided on a fair split. I forgave her, but the love I once had was gone forever. Lisa wasn't surprised by the divorce papers. She signed them without protest, relieved at the chance to start fresh. Having learned her lesson, she vowed never to cheat again. The painful divorce from the woman I once loved left me filled with regret over how things had ended. I wished I could undo it all or find a way to forgive her, but the memory of those 500 betrayals haunted me. We sold the house and split the equity. I moved in with Jenna, a dancer 15 years younger, who I had been dating. With my confidence and happiness restored, I finally found peace. Lisa never gave up hope for reconciliation and wept for weeks after learning I had married someone else. Unable to forgive herself for the damage her vanity and hubris had caused, she never recovered the lost love. Weight gain, faded looks, and bitterness marked her lonely life. Emily and Lisa remained close, but my communication with Lisa dwindled. She would never experience the love she had once shared with her wonderful husband and bore the pain she had inflicted on her loved ones. Ensuring Emily's college was funded, she became a psychologist, driven to help others. She now enjoys a happy married life. The lessons learned from this experience are profound, illustrating the impact of a beautiful yet damaging past.